This is the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game.
Rule number one is you have to believe in yourself. You're the only one who doesn't think you belong in this appointment. The prospect has already validated your existence by scheduling time with you. Get it through your head you belong here, go in there, crush it, and close the deal.
A place where sales professionals can come to learn from other sales professionals and thought leaders that have mastered their craft.
The difference between a good salesperson and a best-in-class salesperson is only 2 minutes. By spending an extra 2 minutes on what you might think is a mundane task in the sales game, you separate yourselves from the pack, you grow your book of business, you close more deals, and you retain your accounts.
As well as their peers who are still striving for perfection to achieve their why.
I have a wife and 4 kids. Failure is not an option.
Real sales professionals, real stories, real results. Are you ready to feel the power?
Hey everybody, welcome to the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game. Today, we have a very special guest from the great state of Tennessee, one of my favorite cities for a weekend trip, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Miss Tracy Cotton. How are you, Tracy?
I'm doing fantastic, David.
Good. Glad to hear it. Yeah, Chattanooga, a lot of inspiration of things I do in my current life from things that I did when I was in Chattanooga over the years. Because I lived in Birmingham for a number of years, and it was only like two and a half hours, maybe 3 hours to get up there and just hang out and have a change of scenery. And that was before Birmingham really went through a massive revitalization. It's a whole different city than it was when I lived there now. Like it's a big city and has big city things, but when I lived there, if you wanted big city things, you had to go to Atlanta, and you could go to a bunch of other places that were relatively close. And it's kind of centrally located. I mean, you're relatively close to Nashville, to Chattanooga. I mean, there's so many places. In Beach, I mean, you go south and go to the Panhandle if you want to hit the Redneck Riviera down there.
Yeah.
You know? But what I liked about Chattanooga and where I was going with the inspiration thing is, one of my buddies got married in Chattanooga probably 25 years ago at this point. And his parents did one of the coolest things that I had ever seen done to that point for a rehearsal dinner. They rented out the aquarium. They had the whole aquarium to themselves. So fast forward in 2018, we rented out the Florida aquarium for our holiday
All we
bash.
do is rent out aquariums.
Yeah, like that's the new thing for us, right?
I've only been through Chattanooga. I've never really. I was just a passerby on our way to Ohio.
Well, I can tell you, I've seen Rock City, I've seen Ruby Falls. I really don't need to go back to either once you've seen them once, right? Mm-mm. And you know, but the one thing I've not done in Chattanooga that a lot of my friends raved about was the Alpine roller coaster thing that they have up there. It's like the old school, it's not like a roller coaster, like it's a gravity deal where you lay on your back on this metal cart and roll down the tracks. They've got them. It's like the ones when you go on a cruise and you go to Royal Caribbean's private island and they have that thing. It's the same general thing, from what I understand, anyhow. But it's on the side of a mountain, so you're hauling tail by the time you get to the bottom.
I'm gonna sit that out.
So you have not been in Chattanooga for long, but before we get to what got you there, why don't you just give us the 10,000-foot overview on how you, up until, let's do pre-Chattanooga, post-Chattanooga.
Sounds like a plan. I am getting ready to celebrate 28 years in the insurance industry. I started out in Nashville, Tennessee, where I'm originally from, and I was an underwriter for a non-standard auto carrier.
Oh, that sounds terrible.
It was fascinating. I literally graduated with a psychology degree and ended up in insurance. You know, the typical person in insurance didn't start out there. And answered a one ad, of course, that back in the day.
What?
A one ad, yes, it was one of those. And I ended up in North Carolina. That was one of the states that was actually, that I was an underwriter for, was North Carolina for a couple of years. And ended up there probably because I thought that the agents thought they knew everything and they really did. Once I got there, I realized that there was North Carolina was very difficult on the insurance end, and it was quite the learning experience. But I stayed there for most of my career. I went from being in personal lines. I was a CSR, worked my way up into being a producer in personal lines, as well as a manager. And then I decided I wanted to go to the dark side. Ended up in commercial lines, started back out as a CSR again, and then worked my way up a little. And then I took a little sidetrack, and I worked for Astonished Results for about 9 months as a consultant, traveled the country. Got to spend a lot of time in agencies and seeing what was kind of going on behind the scenes, and realized how much of a bigger world it was than what I had seen on the agency side before. And then came back to the same agency that I left, which was Morrow Insurance Agency. And at that point, I was able to transition into being a producer on the commercial side, and started out in small commercial and created a niche there, became the farm to fork producer of the agency. And then I decided to leave North Carolina, and that's how I ended up in Chattanooga. Now I'm doing something of a little of all the above. So all the different things that I've done up until this point have kind of led me into the position I'm in now, and it's an exciting new position for me.
So farm to fork, that is very specific. How did that come about?
I had really enjoyed working with small commercial and did a lot of Main Street type of business at first, but loved anything that had to do with food. I was in that food scene actually in the Western North Carolina, which where I was living at the time, and it was just booming. It was so much to do, and it was really easy to get into. But I like the idea of, you know, an inch wide and a mile deep versus the mile wide and the inch deep. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't just leave it right at restaurants or coffee grinders. I mean, like, you know, basically I just had to expand, because I recognized that it was more of a microcosm that you had, especially in that particular scene, and I'm seeing it in a bigger way in other parts of the country now, where they were so tied together. The restaurants wanted to work with the actual farmers, and the farmers were working with the brewers and actually saying, hey, we can grow the stuff that you want for your next brew, whether it be ginger beer or something. And there was like this whole microcosm going on there. And because I love connection, it was excellent for me to get into and just play around in that little microcosm. It was so much fun. And I just decided to call it Farm to Fork. That described exactly what I was working on, or Plow to Pint. That was the other thing, because, you know, had to work with some of those breweries and wineries as well. It was a great time.
That's great branding.
Yeah.
That's absolutely great branding.
It was fun. I actually I attribute, you know, the fact that I got to be around a lot of other growing agencies at the time that I was learning from, friends in the industry, and saw what other people were doing, and that was, you know, it was where I was able to try to find my own niche, and that was what I decided to do.
Well, I'll tell you, Chattanooga, not a bad food scene on its own. My legendary story, and Kyle's heard this one before, of Chattanooga, is when I went to Big City Brewery and didn't realize that the refills on their brewed cream soda that they have there, or root beer, I don't remember if I was drinking cream soda or root beer, were free. And my check came and I had drunk like $50 worth of soda. And about stroked out.
Wow.
That's a lot of soda. A lot of sugar.
Soda.
Yeah. So talk about Chattanooga. Like, what are you doing now that's different?
When I left North Carolina, I decided to sell my house in North Carolina. I wanted to move to be closer to family. I'm 2 hours away from them now, and that was really good, because I didn't realize then that was in September of 2020. I just had gotten my house ready and knew that the market was really booming, and if I was going to do something, I needed to do it soon. Mm-hmm. Did that, and was trying to find some place to land. Looked at Knoxville. For a minute, I looked at Nashville. I just didn't want to move back there. I loved it when I was living there, but I didn't want to get back in that whole scene. It's gotten so big. But I loved Chattanooga, because we used to come down to Chattanooga from Nashville growing up, and I wanted that opportunity to do some of the things that I'd done in Asheville, get outdoors, enjoy the food and beverage scene, but not be doing it on the scale that's in Nashville. as well as the fact that it's just a much more outdoorsy city in Chattanooga than it really is in Nashville. Nashville's, a lot of fun, but it's not got the same outdoor. I can go hiking, I can go kayaking all in the same afternoon if I wanted to. Stand up paddling, it's right nearby. It's a lot of things to do close by, and still in that idea of that being a very central location, because you're right, I can be down to Atlanta or back to Nashville within a couple of hours' time. There's a great airport here, and I thought that it would be a good place to land. But I was looking and I was realizing that what I had developed and grown for the farm to fork, I just didn't know if I wanted to try to do it again. I had done 7 years of it. I gave it a great run, felt great about it, thought about the idea of transferring it into Tennessee and just rolling with it. And I had done blogs and videos, and there was a lot that I kind of felt good about. And then I also realized that I wanted to be able to get a job. And I thought, I've got opportunity here, but what if I did something different? What if I tried something different? And I happened to be looking through Indeed, found a couple opportunities here in Chattanooga. One would have been actually basically like starting. It would have been basically taking and almost like a startup. And I looked at that opportunity, and it would have been really interesting. They literally had just gotten their management system. They were just getting their carriers together. They were taking over part of a book of business. And I just thought, I don't know. I mean, that sounds so exciting, and I could really get into it. That'd be fantastic to have be able to put my thumbprint on something. And I thought, I don't know that I want to do that. Here I'm moving into a town that I really want to spend all this time getting out and doing things. And then I'm going to go ahead and just marry myself to a new job, marry myself to a job. Because I could just tell that this was going to be
a lot of work.
Yeah. Or I could go to work for an agency that was 100 years old, like the one I had left, had all the great benefits, as well as a really growing, a growth mentality that I felt was tenable. And I could take over a whole new role. And the role and I got to name it even. I got to decide what I got to name my own title is Executive Client Manager. And I work with the largest producer in the agency, and I get to duplicate their efforts is what it amounts to. There's a gap that I recognize for a lot of producers where they run into this wall where they've grown enough that they've got this great client base. They're really, they're starting to really make some money, but they want to continue to grow. They're they love the sales. They want to keep on with the sales, or there are other things within the agency that they're busy with, like as an ownership perhaps, if they in management. And what do they do with their book of business? Because in many cases, the account managers or CSRs, they're going to be fantastic at what they're doing. They're going to be really good with those numbers. They're going to be really good with getting those certificates out. But they're not going to be able to do some of the same things that the producer would have been able to do with those same clients. There's this gap there where they need almost like a second them to actually manage the book of business while they continue to produce. And I just see that that's a possibility, that there's definitely some agencies out there that are trying. And Star Matthews said, hey, this is what we're looking for. We want somebody to have the same kind of conversations with the clients that the producer would, whether it be renewal conversations, whether it be midterm conversations, actually getting into the risk management, actually talking about their audits, actually going into the loss control visits, being part of that process, but it not actually having to have the producer there 100% of the time. And that's where I'm at now.
So you are taking 28 years of experience and taking that out to make sure that those accounts stay on the books, is what I'm hearing.
Yes. And
do you do much in terms of new business stuff with producers, or are you pretty much because I would view you as being a retention specialist, right? An absolute rock star going in on those key accounts and making sure that you're the glue that holds them together and they never leave us.
So interesting that you say glue. I actually almost picture it as being a lubricant, if you will. Call me the WD-40 of the agency. Instead of trying to get everybody to stick to us, as much as reducing the friction that I see that actually happens very often at the renewal process. But I also have had the opportunity because, like I said, the producer that I'm working with, he's continuing to churn in the business. And now he's got a more vibrant onboarding process because of what I'm able to do for the clients that are coming in as new clients that they had not actually had a process for before. They'd had a process, but not the kind of process that I wanted to see for that level of client. Everybody else had, you fill out this form, you sign this online, and you've got this going on, you get some certificates, everything's great. But I really wanted people to be able to plug in from the get-go and really start feeling like we're part of, we're part of the risk management. We're a partner in their business there. And that's something that the one guy, in this particular case, there's only so much that he can do, and he can definitely, he can get the business and has done really well at it for over a decade now. He's one of the Matthews of Star Matthews. People love doing business with him, but they also, I think what they were looking for in most cases is that they also needed to be able to reach him 24/7 almost.
Like ongoing support.
That ongoing support. And
that's the occupational hazard specifically. I'm not going to say specifically, but certainly in the middle market, right? And yes. I think one of the things that helped me early in my career when I was a producer in the middle market was I used the custom risk services department of our agency like what they're using you for.
Right.
In terms of, we visited the sick, no different than what I do at Florida Risk. We were looking for people who needed help. We knew they needed hand-holding. But then it was a more natural progression. I don't want to say necessarily more natural, but it was a natural progression for me to have custom risk services come in and honor the service timeline, right? They're going to be the ones who do the loss control visits, whether it be something we were doing or something they were doing in conjunction with the carrier or whatever else. And so they became the people that were in the account, literally, once a month, sometimes every other week. And the relationship was cemented by having those people there. And truthfully, I never gave it a second doubt that I was going to hold on to that account because we were embedded. Once they were in, we were embedded. And so it was really liberating for me as a producer to know that they had my back and we're going to keep that account on the books. I would do the things. It's not like I would neglect my clients, but I knew that I didn't have to be in there all the time. I knew that if there was an issue with an accident report or an incident report or whatever else, that was going to go to custom risk services. They were going to sort it out with the people there. I would be copied on the emails and could review it at a high level, but I didn't have to be involved in the mechanics, and I basically was able to do nothing but produce, period. And if you look at I don't have any experience working with a national broker. I've competed against them, and I know people who do. But the model you're describing sounds very similar to what I hear from friends of mine that work at Marsh, Willis, Aon, because they're taking someone who has the exact same skill set as a producer, essentially, but maybe just doesn't necessarily want to be a producer or, for whatever reason. And so the producer goes out and they hook it and they bring it in, and then that other person cleans it and fries it and maintains it for the rest of the time that it's there, right?
Yeah.
That's how I look at that. That is a very valuable role in the life of a middle market producer, period. In any middle market producer who has that resource better take care of that resource, because that is only going to make them a better producer. It's going to make the agency more valuable because their book will be more valuable. But we can focus on the one thing we love to do, and that is just go out, hunt, and kill. Hunt and kill. I don't ever want to be account executive. I don't ever want to have to worry. I've been in the office by myself for the last week, and it was just this was a perfect storm of crap that I've been dealing with all week. I have COVID, right? I'm obviously back now, but I had COVID starting last weekend, and it got nasty. Like, I pushed myself too early. I came back Tuesday, and I'm just like, yeah, that was a bad move. Wednesday, I was down for the count again. Yesterday, I worked a full day, felt great all day, was definitely drained of energy when I got home, but wasn't sick. And then today, I feel perfectly. I'm literally probably like 95% at this point. I can still, I still have some issues, but, Nicole, literally, I sent the text out to everybody over the weekend that I've got COVID, no sales meeting Monday, everything else. And Nicole texts me and says, I got selected for jury duty. I'm like, oh my gosh. So this is my safety valve in the office, so that if there's anything that needs to be done outside of what is immediately the task at hand for me here, I have her that I can fall back on. And then you throw it another step that my oldest son is getting ready to come into the agency. Today is actually his last day of working at Publix, and on Monday he starts full-time at Florida Risk. But I've taken literally the last 2 months to train him, because he's not coming in to do anything at all insurance related. He's coming in to do all of our media production stuff, video editing,
fantastic.
blog posting, and he knows about it, but he doesn't know about it. Like, he doesn't know the ins and the outs, and he certainly doesn't know the way that I want to do things and all of that. And so, I've been really, really as patient as I humanly can be, and that's a big ask for me. And for the last couple of months, almost every morning, and listen, there's a lesson to be learned here. I've come in and I've spent my time in the mornings, which is usually my time in the morning, training him on how to do the different things that I'm going to expect of him when he comes on board. And, if I had a Tracy Cotton, I would have no anxiety at all with that happening, but I don't. We're still very much set up like you would expect a traditional agency. And, Tracy, if you ever want to come to the Sunshine State, we might have something to talk about. But, that's something that I can see a role. We're going through the EOS piece with Traction right now. We're putting in the entrepreneurial operating system. We've tried to kick it off 3 different times, and, well, guess what? When you're not on it, then you defer the meeting because you haven't committed to it. And so we're actually going to have our kickoff meeting this Monday and review the scorecard and do all the things we need to do. By the way, my staff was far more kind on the scorecard than I was. I
totally fudged those numbers.
Yeah, so the first thing we're going to do is talk about honesty, because the only way you can fix things is to actually be honest about them. And I mean, there are a lot of things that I do really, really well, and there are a lot of things that I don't do really, really well. And the reason I don't do really, really well about them is I don't like them. It's not that I'm not capable. It's I don't want to do it. And so anytime I have the chance to push that off, I'm going to. It's just the nature of the beast. And so we have the person in-house now that's going to be the implementer. I am by far the visionary. I'm the visionary all day, every day, twice on Sunday. But I'm not going to be the implementer. I can't be both. Some people might be able to, but we're going to sit down and we're going to go through that. And it's like I was telling, and that's Nicole, and I told her this morning when we were talking, I said, you guys were way too kind. I said, I got the results of what everybody said, and you graded us far better than what I did. And so we're going to go with my number, honestly. Yeah. Unless theirs is justified. But I mean, part of that too is going through it with your team and being able to have honest and open communication for your culture. And people are weird about that, right? So not very many people who sit in my chair are going to say, come on, let me have it. Anything and everything. I'm not going to hold it against you. But that's literally something I have done my entire existence. Now, the problem is that if you are open like that and you do get the feedback from people, you better act on it too, because that will also squash culture if people give you the feedback and then there's no response. So from our perspective, Monday's going to be a huge day. But all that to say, when we get to that point, are the right people in the right seats? And then what are the other things that we need to do that are going to make our life easy? And I can tell you right now, I would have a significant comfort level as a middle market producer if I had somebody in that role, because we don't have it. And truthfully, I hope you're getting paid good, because it's not a cheap role to hire for. I understand, that's a well over 6-figure job here. And the people that I have talked to, I had a couple people who have reached out pitching me on bringing somebody in that capacity. it was like $125,000 and commission off of the book that they were managing. They wanted a percentage of the commission in addition to that. And I don't argue that the people were worth that. It just wasn't the right time in our life cycle to bring somebody like that in. Even though the accounts that we have justify that, it's not the right time. It's getting close to the right time at this point. I mean, we've got the level of complexity on accounts, and just really to be able to keep up with all of the different things we promise, right? I mean, one of the things I say at the point of sale every time is we deliver what everybody else promises. And I do. I mean, that's the one thing I can tell you. I break my back to make sure that if I tell a client, these are all the things we're going to do for you, that's what we do.
Yep.
But I can't break my back to do that for the foreseeable future. Right?
No.
We're not slowing down.
No, we're ramping up, and we're I mean, that's what's really, really scary.
I think we've been able to get by doing it ourselves for the, for however long it's been, but
we are ramping up at an incredible pace. We really are.
It's not doable. You just can't do it at that pace for any length of time. Or if you do,
not without getting burnt out and just being a crazy mess all the time.
And I think that's really typical. And that was one of the things that I saw even, like it would have been 8-9 years ago that when I was with Astonish and doing the consulting business, which, David, don't get me started with agency owners that wanted to hear my honest opinion, but didn't really.
Right.
Didn't really want to hear my honest opinion.
I come with a warning label, Tracy. I come with a warning label when I deal with agency principals, and it's verbal, but I tell them, you ask me for my opinion, you're going to get it, so don't get pissed off at me when I give it to you. And I'm not the most gentle, right? Like, I'm a very, very... If I'm smooth as silk when I'm in front of a client, but when it comes to the other stuff, I'm just direct because I'm so busy. The easiest way for me to get from point A to point B is to go straight from point A to point B. If there's something wrong, hey, here's what's wrong. I don't mean to hurt anybody's feelings. It's business. Here's the problem. Let's find a solution. Let's implement it and be done. End of story.
The other piece of that, when you were talking about your staff giving really good report, that's good. That's awesome. I would end up with, because I would go through and I'd be interviewing all the different people in the agency. In some agencies I was only, a key person here, a key person there kind of thing. They told me who to talk to, which is, a loaded thing. Here I was with like people almost crying on me about, I just really, really would love to see this change in the agency because this is so difficult because of what's going on here. Can you help us? And I'm like, last time I checked, I'm just the messenger. All I'm going to do is basically take everything that y'all are telling me, and I'm going to go to the powers that be. And after that, I'm leaving. I'm walking out. I'm going back to my life, and you've got to live here. So maybe you're going to have to figure out a way to do something too. And it's not just tell a consultant everything you just told me if you've never told anybody else that. And that's a scary thought. But there was so much eye-opening going on there that was fantastic. But that was one of those, being a psychology major, I also recognized that was the reason why I did not become a psychologist, because I knew that what would have happened if somebody would have, had the couch moment. They would have told me their whole life story. I would have told them exactly what they needed to do, and they would have done it. And I would have just said, okay, you're done there. And they'd be like, what? I thought you wanted me to come see you. No, I'm done here. I'm done. And I knew that I would have never been able to do it. So I would have told people, get over it, or I don't know. I'm much kinder than that, really. But there's a part of when somebody says, hey, I really need some help, and you offer them that lifeline, and then they just keep drowning, that I knew that I was not going to be able to sit around forever. But out of that relationship came my friendship with Kelly Donahue-Piro. And
I was going to ask if that was the same group, because I didn't know of Astonish. I only know of Agency Performance Partner.
Yeah, it's a good thing. It was very lots of crazy stuff that went on during that time.
Well, you said that, I didn't, but I've heard stories.
It was very, I felt like I was like part of like this rock star thing going on, and I was not. I didn't really fit into that, but it was great to be around it because the energy was great. I mean, literally they had this little conference. They had a little convention they had, and there's like an ice luge with vodka shots coming off of it, and this band that was top 40 played. I mean, it was so over the top with what they were doing with their agents, while down deep, these agents, except for people like Chris Paradiso, Chris would have made it regardless. He just learned some stuff right then and there with what they were putting out. He was able to kind of grab onto some of it, and he actually took the he literally went ahead and took the treadmill and became a marathoner, in other words, as opposed to most everybody else got the treadmill and they put clothes on it. They had some ideas, they had some good thoughts, they did have some good possibilities at that point because there was a need for it then, and most people didn't really run with it. They were promised all these things and they just didn't come through with it. But Kelly learned so much about the industry from that. I learned so much about the industry from that. But one of the things I think I'm realizing now is, you say 28 years of doing what I've been doing. I don't have to use all of it every day, but it's so nice to have it in my pocket when I need it.
It is great to have a vault, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, and that's the whole thing. I agree with you 100%. But if Kyle comes to me and says, "Hey, man, I've never seen this before. What do you know about blah, blah, blah?" And it might
Chances
be the
are
most
you've seen it.
It's the most ridiculous off-the-wall thing ever, but I've probably seen it. And if I haven't, I know I've worked with somebody who has, and we've discussed it, or I've been in a CIC institute or something and heard people talk about it there. But, good, bad, or otherwise, our experiences are what forms, the advice that we give and the things that we're able to do to help people going forward. And so, I've got a really, really good memory too. Like that's my long-term memory is freakish. Like I had a guy the other day say, "Oh yeah, we talked about that." I was like, "Yeah, no, we didn't." He's like, "I'm almost 100%." I said, "Listen, bro, I've got a memory like an elephant."
Listen here, bro.
Bro.
If you would have said 5 minutes ago we talked about this, I probably wouldn't have argued with you because I easily could have gotten distracted in the short term. But if you say, "Oh, we talked about this several months ago," and we had talked about it, I would be able to recall the conversation literally word for word. It's just, that's probably one of the biggest advantages I have is I have an extremely good long-term memory. So I never forget people. And, if I happen to be somewhere and getting into the libations a little bit, that memory gets even better.
I can vouch for this.
That's a scary thought.
I will never forget, we were down at Hog's Breath Saloon in Key West, and I was holding court at the Oyster Bar one afternoon, and I was taking care of the tab for everybody, and it's a U-shape, and I was in the middle, and I had my people to the left and the right of me, and this guy over here to the right was talking to me, and I was like, just out of curiosity, man, what do you do for a living that you can be down here? In Key West on a Thursday afternoon or a Friday afternoon. He's like, "Oh, I'm in the oil and gas business." I'm like, "Wow." I said, "That's got to be interesting." I said, "You from Texas?" He's like, "No, I'm from West Virginia." I was like, "West Virginia? Get out of here. Where are you from?" He goes, "Oh, you wouldn't have heard of it." I'm like, "Oh, try me. Let's see." He goes, "I'm from a little place called West Union." I'm like, "West Union? Like right there off of Route 50? He's like, "Yeah, Route 50. I was like, "There's a guy named Bert Leisure that owned a mercantile there that I bought my first SKS assault rifle from back in 1992. Is he still there?" He's like, "Oh, that crazy SOB. He's never." I was like, West Union is one of my favorite places ever. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's this quaint little Appalachian town that got the old white church building that sits right there off of Route 50. I remembered it because I always thought that was a really cool, picture of Americana every time you would drive through there. So then the next guy comes around, and it turns around that he worked with a dude that was my client, that was the CEO of a trucking company that I represented, and I just went right around the table, and the next thing you know, now I've got people in all these other states that are handing me their business cards, and the crazy part is nobody ever asked me what I did for a living. Didn't tell them.
Interesting.
Well,
I followed up with them when I got back.
Yeah.
Right? And then that was appropriate. But, I think that, the fact that I've lived literally, we moved every 2 or 3 years when I was growing up. That's the other thing I think that has really conditioned me to be somewhat successful as a producer is I didn't have a choice. I grew up in an era where bullying was not defined. How we handled bullying was we fought about it, and the next day we were playing together in the cul-de-sac again. But if you decided you wanted to bully me, then you were probably going to get punched in the face, and you were either going to punch me back and beat me up, or I was going to punch you in the face and beat you up. But that's how it was dealt with as kids back then. And guess what? Probably not a whole lot of bullying like there is today. But at the end of the day, we didn't have the issues, and so because we moved every 2 to 3 years, I was forced to make new friends all the time. And through the formative years of being in junior high and high school, that's a tough ask of any kid.
Yes.
It's a really tough ask. And, I will never forget how just absolutely devastated I was that we moved away from Tampa, going like partway through my junior year of high school. Okay. And we moved up to Parkersburg, West Virginia, of all places, right down Route 50 from West Union. And we moved up right before basketball season my senior year, so I would have junior year, so I'd have the ability to try out and play basketball and get involved in sports and all of that stuff. And so for the last year and a half of my high school career, probably the absolute worst time to pick up a kid and move them, I had to do that. And guess what? Those people were probably the best friends that I'll ever have. They were the people I somehow got closest to. And, everything being considered equal, I never would have played baseball if I stayed in Florida. It just wouldn't have happened. Far too political here. Far too, it was just different. And then I went up there, got full ride to play, and played all through high school. And so, I've always been that person that looks at the positive no matter how bad the situation is. You could tell me that you need to amputate 2 of my arms and 1 of my legs, and I'm going to say, well, at least I got my left leg left. You know what I mean? That's just the way that I think. And so that can be a detriment at some points, but typically not. But I think that's the other thing is just the constant moving conditioned me to be able to adapt and change my personality. And when I got into the insurance industry and started interviewing for jobs and they gave me my profile, agencies are very particular on what they want from people that are going to go into a producer role on their personality profile. And mine literally came back almost equal in all 4 quadrants. It was like literally almost 25% in each one. It was like 26, 24, 27, 23. But mathematically, it was basically equal across the board. And so the recruiter called me and she said, I don't know how in the world I'm ever going to sell this to an agency principal because you're not a high D. And I said, well, I guess I don't understand. She goes, they expect you to be a high D to be a good producer. And I said, well, I think they have their criteria wrong. And she said, well, what do you mean? I said, I would think the absolute best salesperson would be a chameleon that could integrate with any personality type on the streets.
Yeah.
And I can
I
can literally get along with anybody. I said, can I be a driver when I need to be a driver? I absolutely can. But that doesn't mean that that's the best thing for me to do in every single situation. And I said, the difference between me and everybody else is I actually answer the questions honestly. I didn't try and beat the test, right? And so, that actually did hurt me a little bit as I went to try and get jobs. And I had several tell me, no, we just don't think that you're going to be able to cut it because you're not a high D. And guess what? My long-term memory kicks in every single day. I remember every single person who told me that.
It's funny, man. Same thing happened to me, like in the co-ed years. Shortly thereafter, the personality tests were just not. I
don't buy into them. I
think it's stupid. I'm like, if you want to talk to me and get to know me, then do that. Like, don't send me some bullshit, questions where it's asking the same thing over and over again. I just get annoyed and start scribbling stuff to be done with it.
I can look at your resume, and if it tells me that you worked at ADP for 5 years and you had progressive responsibility for 5 years, that tells me you're going to be a successful producer. Because if you can survive in that environment for 5 years, not that it's a horrible environment, but it's a larger company, bigger chance for you to get lost. It tells me that you can make it. You can make it working. The one thing that would scare somebody like that is going from something so massive to something that is a small business for all practical purposes. That would freak them out. But that's all I really need to see. And if I can validate that that's accurate and have a conversation, the person's got some common sense.
Right.
That's what I'm gonna look for all day, every day. I don't need a personality test to tell me that.
And the personality tests don't really allow for the idea of a utility player. I mean, they're not really taking in consideration that somebody can play different positions on the field. And you need, I think that unless, I mean, I know that there's a lot of compartmentalization in insurance, and it does well. I know people that I've worked with that I depended upon them to absolutely pour over every VIN number on a fleet. I depended on them to notice all the, like, the minutia. And then I also have that same, expectation when I'm dealing with somebody who's going to be communicating on a higher level. They're not necessarily the same person, but I also think that there's more opportunity out there for there to be somebody who can do that with, maybe with some coaching. I never what sales business that, what sales that I had, my training was all on my own. I had, I worked for an agency that was more than happy to make sure that I got my CIC in. They were happy to see me go from a CISR to a CIC, and they were very supportive in the education realm, but they didn't have any real training at that point in time. They do now, but they did not at that point in time. They weren't doing any sales training with their own producers, and they certainly weren't sending anybody out to, like, Outbound with Jeb Blunt and Anthony Iannarino. But I wanted to go, and that was on my own dime, and it benefited me in so many ways because I was determined to learn those skills, even if I knew that, that I might never be, in that role entirely. It was a good thing to do. So I think there's opportunity there. A lot of times it will take a little bit of extra grooming, or definitely giving somebody the opportunity to do something different, which is kind of what my life is all about anyway, is the idea of trying new things. And that's
we know all about that, don't we, Welder Tracy? So my other superpower is I literally see everything online. Like, it's crazy. But I do, and, like, even the most minute details. So you got to tell the story. Kyle has no clue.
No clue.
Tell the story of what you're getting ready to do and sort of the story behind it, because I think it's actually pretty awesome.
Well, and there would not be a 22 and 22 if there had not been a 50 for 50. In 2018, I was getting out my planner. I'm hybrid. I love my little paper planner, and it helps me just to, like, write and do.
Which one do you use?
I use Passion Planner, and I went from a very boring to the red. This year was my little red one.
It's saucy.
I was saucy. I'm looking at 2019 and going, here's this birthday, here's that birthday, here's my birthday. Oh, I'm turning 50. That seems very depressing. I've got so much in my life that I've never done. I should make a list of things to do. And so I wrote a few things down. I probably got to 10 or 15, maybe it was 20. I don't remember now, except for that I was just writing some things that I really wanted to do down. And I thought, well, this is kind of like a bucket list. And I thought, what would be really fun is if I tried to do 50 new things for my 50th birthday, for my 50th birth year.
This reeks of Chris Green, by the way. This is like
there's a reason why he and I are very, very, very close on lots of things, and we bounce
except he
ideas
just
back
keeps
and forth.
making it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
It is. I mean,
he's going to be hunched over looking like a garden gnome at like 100 years old, working on his millionth flood education video.
We literally just discussed, just recently he and I discussed, okay, now he's got this great online flood insurance center, learning center, and then who's going to manage that? Because he's out still doing the thing. And I was like, that's not me, but dude, you're going to need to do that. So we talked a little bit about that just recently. So I get this idea that I'm going to do 50 for 50, and I get all my friends, not all my friends, but lots of friends involved. And I end up with 50 items. The list was actually over 100. I had to pick 50. Like, people suggested golf, and I just wasn't about it. Instead, I wanted to skydive, so I did that instead. But
Plus, you can knock that out in a couple hours.
Well, and that's the beauty of some of the things that I picked out. I was very specific about what I was looking for. I wanted it to be things that weren't necessarily going to require world travel, which I didn't know, of course, at that point in time. 2019 was a great year to do it. 2020 would have been a terrible year to try to do it. Instead, I did it in 2019, and then I didn't do anything again in 2020 or 2021. But that's why 2022, I thought, I'm going to try to do something again. I want to do it again because there's more things I want to do. And I had so much fun doing it the first time around. I really want to do it. But this time, 50 for 50 was great because I got a lot of my friends involved with it. They said, hey, we'll take you stand-up paddling. They said, hey, we'll take you, to Tallulah Falls Gorge. We'll hike with you on certain things. We'll do different things with you. And getting other people involved was probably the best part about it, because it really helped me to get to know some people better. It gave people opportunity to really feel like they were part of something, and I blogged about all of it. It was great. And then this year I just thought, this one isn't just about me. I'm going to do 22 and 22, but I want people to see exactly what goes into it. I want to see other people doing the same things. I really want to give people a bigger, broader base on it. And so I've really started talking about it on LinkedIn, to the idea of it challenging others to, maybe it's not a 22 and 22, it's 2 and 22. It's one new thing. But that has been kind of a fun process. And just recently, because I had 3 or 4 items that are not going to be able to be done on my list because I had to cancel a trip, I chose to cancel a trip. I was trying to come up with some new things, and yesterday I just added a new one. And that flexibility and that being open to new experiences absolutely translates into everything that I do, and including insurance. But yesterday, one of the guys that I work with, one of his clients is Chambers Welding here in Chattanooga, and in addition to being a fantastic welding and fabrication shop, on the weekends they're now going to be having these classes that are mostly geared towards women in welding and giving people opportunities to try something. And so it's a 2-hour class. I'm going to do it in a couple of weeks, and it's literally taking like this chain and welding it at different points so that it holds up a wine bottle. How fun is that? Cool. Isn't that cool? And I'm like, sure, I'll do it. Glass blowing's on the list for this time around. Hang gliding, because there's a lot of hang gliding.
You're just doing all the dangerous stuff, huh?
I do some of that. I do a little bit of both. My whole thing is I kind of balance out some dangerous stuff with things that are pretty mundane. Like, I'm planning on tiling a kitchen floor, which is dangerous just because, I might like kill other people in the process. But I try to balance it with things that are more mundane and
sure.
but not mundane to everybody. It's things that for me are kind of a big deal. So, but that's
I think it's important though to identify stuff like that. I mean, you just inspired me to come up with the 50 for 50 for me when I turn 50 in a couple years, and that'll be it'll be interesting to see what I come up with. But I'm a big fan of the bucket list, but I'm not just a big fan in the list. I'm a big fan in crossing things off of it, right?
Yes.
So, I just think of all of the things that I've done, and I'm sure my parents sit back like, what the heck is he thinking? Why is he doing that? Well, guess what? I just did something you'd never do, right? I have a new life experience, and that's going to help me at some point when I'm sitting at Hog's Breath at 3 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon, and I need to share that I, rode my Harley across the Keys because it was a bucket list thing for me to ride a motorcycle all the way from the tip of Florida to Key West. Okay, it's done. Now I'll leave it there, and we'll move on to the next thing. But,
and that's the beauty of it, is you can move on to the next thing.
Absolutely. So what was your favorite? What was your favorite thing? If you had to pick one, I'll give you 2 if you need it. But what would you say your favorite thing in the 50 out of 50 is?
In the 50 out of 50, the favorite thing that I did, that's a really, really hard one, just because it was probably the favorite thing that I did was a sprint triathlon. Woody Brown, my friend from Georgia, he's a great agent down there, and he had suggested to add to the list a triathlon. And I was like, no, that's not happening. I can't, there's no way. I don't even swim. I don't even swim in a straight line, much less be able to do it for that long. But I said, what about a sprint triathlon? Would that still count? And he's like, totally. And that discipline that it took to finally actually go from just paddling about a little bit to actually swimming laps to getting out and riding a bike, like really riding a bike, not just meandering down a trail, like actually riding a bike, back to a little bit of running. I had done that before. I'd done some 5Ks prior to that, so I had some experience in that. And then my mother got to come in and be there with me because I had gone through a really hard time that year. So the 50 for 50 was like in the middle of my life falling apart. Behind the scenes is the way that happens sometimes. And she came because I didn't have anybody else to go with me. Here I have something really important to me, and I didn't really have anybody else that could go. And she was there to take video and be right there for the finish line. And it was just that kind of experience of, I did that. Mm-hmm. And I literally did that and the skydiving within 2 weeks of each other. And
wow.
that was where, like, it just dawned on me that I could do anything. And I really wish that I'd not waited till I was 50 years old to realize that. And I probably at some point had always had that ability to do different things. I mean, you look at my career, I was never stagnant. I never just stayed with something forever and ever. If it started being a little stagnant, or if I felt like that I wanted to do more, I just created something different from it. I went on to this, or I added that, and I was able to kind of stay in the same pool and keep paddling, but I was able to explore new waters at the same time. And I just think that's something that really people shouldn't be waiting until they're 54 necessarily. But 50 is a good time, because a lot of times there are some things that are more financial. Like, you want to be able to do some things, and it starts getting expensive. I think I actually added up, and it was probably $7,000 or $8,000 that I spent that year just on my experiences. And that was a lot of money when it was just me. And I don't regret any of it, but I really didn't want to do that for 22 again. I wanted to be a little bit smarter about it. We'll see. I may end up doing some other crazy things before it's over with. I've got the rest of the year to do, but that's part of the process is realizing what is it that you really want to do. And if it's something you don't really want to do, then don't put it on the list. Mm-hmm. And maybe you wrote it down, and then like you look at it a couple months later and you're like going, that's why. Or you go, you know what? Let me add this. This would be even more fun, or this would add something to it. Or maybe like you get a bonus round. I went stand-up paddling down in New Orleans with a good friend of mine, Julie Brendel. This is from an agency in Indiana. And she's coming back down to Chattanooga to go stand up paddling with me in September. I've got kind of a little group of lady friends, all in the insurance industry, and we're going to do a retreat. And I'm really looking forward to that one, because I think that's going to be a great opportunity for me to challenge some of my compatriots to really delve a little bit deeper into themselves and really see what it is that they really want to do with the rest of their, what do I want to do when I grow up? They're agency owners and other industry individuals, and they're just some of the best ladies that I know in insurance, and Julie's one of them. But that same stand-up paddling experience, then later, because it was on my list, I did a mechanical bull in New Orleans, because it was there. And it was on my list, and I wasn't planning on doing it that week, but it was there, so why not go ahead and check it off my list? It's a balance between planning ahead and making open to those opportunities as they come up. And that's not really any different than what it is we do in insurance. You can plan, and you can schedule, and you can make appointments, and you can really go after certain clients, but then there's going to be those other clients that you need to be like, that peripheral vision, you've got to be able to be watching for, because it may be the one thing that you hadn't even thought is the one thing that you hadn't even thought about that client, and it's the one client that could end up completely changing your career. And that's totally what I think is important about that. The exercise of it, if nothing else, gives you those skills that I just can't even begin to explain how impacting that it had on my life at that point. So
it's awesome. David, you're muted.
Uh-oh. He's just talking away.
I was getting ready to start. No, and then as soon as Kyle said it, I remembered. I actually had a tickle in my throat and hit a coughing fit there for a couple minutes. So
that's okay.
Well, listen, 28 years deep, what's the best piece of advice that you would give to a new person coming into the industry, looking back 28 years later? And I want to wrap up with this so that we can finish on time and be respectful of your time. There's a lot of wisdom in that noggin. You've had experiences in a variety of roles inside the agency. You've been a consultant that's allowed you to see all kinds of other agencies. what do you think the best piece of advice is, or what is one good piece of advice that you could give to anybody who's coming into this industry, starting out, and maybe wondering if they made the right choice?
That there really is no one choice in insurance. I'm continue to be amazed at the different ways that a career can change, and the opportunity that's there. I mean, there's literally whatever it is that you really just gets you going in the morning, there's a place for that within the industry. And it could be any different role out there, and it is what you make of it. If you are really willing to put your heart and soul into it, that it could be anything. It could really go anywhere.
Cool.
There you have it. That's a mic drop moment, although my mic is kind of permanently attached to my
Fixed.
desktop.
Fixed.
Yeah. And not necessarily cheap enough for me to be willing to drop, but
Absolutely.
True.
proverbial mic drop anyhow. Well, listen, we've been going for an hour. Tracy, definitely will have you back, because I know there's a lot of stuff we can talk about outside of this. We didn't even get into what I originally wanted to talk about, which is women in insurance, which honestly sounds terrible, but I think you brought us so much value. People, this is a woman in insurance who's been really, really successful, and they found a way to have a good work-life balance and have achieved so much. I mean, the 50 out of 50 thing is so flippin' impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That I think it's a different spin on the same thing that we've talked about. We've talked about all of the things that the insurance industry has done that have held women back. This was a great episode on somebody who's achieved and done almost everything that they pretty much wanted inside the industry. And I just think it's a different way to frame it and show that it's, I'm not going to say Tracy's never had issues before, with being a woman in the insurance industry, and that there haven't been circumstances along the way that could have been and possibly should have been handled differently. We can talk about that in another way, but if you look at it from a positive point of view, I don't know what else you could have done to be able to be in the position you're in right now and be able to have the freedom to do a lot of those things. I mean, you probably could have. I just don't know what it would be off the top of my head.
I totally agree, David, and I think that is kind of part of the point. And I just think it's great because I look around and I want other women who are like in the same age range not to feel like that it's necessarily over until they're ready for it to be over, that they have a place, there's a place for us, and we just need to kind of like grab it, find it, make it happen.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Well, we appreciate you coming on. Everybody else, thanks for listening. We appreciate you, and we will catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Power Producers Podcast. You can follow Killing Commercial Insurance on Facebook and YouTube. And if you want to take your game to the next level, check out our book, The Extra 2 Minutes, and our website, killingcommercial.com.